Mike Scott.
Lukey.
Something, probably the most, effective thing that I've heard you say that's really touched my life is self-care is more for the people around you or something along those lines. Can you dive into what you mean by that?
Yeah, the phrase that I use is self-care is not about you. And I'm not going to try and teach anything. I'll just share my experience on that. I remember it quite clearly. I've always done quite a lot of what people would term self-care. Mainly it shows up for me in like training, so mountain biking, that sort of stuff. I used to feel very guilty for doing it. So for example, I used to mountain bike to work quite often in Cape Town, which is quite a ride. It would take quite a long time. And even though I'd leave at like 5 or 5:30 a.m., I would feel guilty that I was training on a weekday instead of working. And I'd feel guilty about it. Right.
Okay, so it's not family related, it's work related.
In the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. But something shifted and I heard it from somebody else. You know, one of my sort of mantras is like nothing I say is original. I pride myself on just copying other people and finding smart things and regurgitating them, but not claiming them. So I heard somebody say something along the lines of like, self-care is actually not about you. It's got very little to do with you. It's got to do with the people that are depending on you. And that shift really clicked in my brain, that it went from keeping myself healthy and fit is not only a distraction from the people that depend on me, business, partners, staff, then extended to family once I had a family, and all the people that depend on me or rely on me. It's not only a distraction, it's a requirement. So now when I think about training or not training, the way that I eat, how much I drink, a lot of that motivation for me it's no longer selfish, but it's actually like a responsibility. I have a responsibility to the people that depend on me to take care of myself, because me particularly, I'm quite a binary extreme dude. So like when I'm not training, I'm just an arsehole. I really am. I'm just difficult to be around. I'm anxious. I'm aggressive. I'm short. I'm unfocused. I'm not present. When I am training, the opposite is true. I'm more connected. I'm open. I want to be around people. I'm more confident. So it really is those simple words like, if you can flick a switch in your brain that goes from self-care is indulgent to actually I have an obligation to take care of myself so that I can show up more for the people that depend on me, it can change your entire life.
So you spoke about training. Is that the main thing you're talking about there?
I think when I had that realization, it was. But now that was when I was in my late 20s. I'm 42. Now it's everything. So now it's like I need to meditate every day. If I don't, I'm a mess. I need to train every day. If I don't, I'm a mess. I need to not drink alcohol. I do drink, but very little. When I drink, I don't sleep well. When I don't sleep well, I'm a mess.
Yeah.
So now it just extends to what I call the fundamentals, like training, sleep, what you put in your body, meditation. Like those things are not about me.
I must have stole that terminology off you because I say the fundamentals as well. So for my habit tracker, I've got the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And that is train, so everyday train. That either means resistance training or some sort of cardio, running, riding, etc. Meditation, read, audiobook or read. And the other one was around alcohol consumption, but now I'm sober. That's not really required. But yeah, they were the big four.
Yeah, but let's jump into that for a second.
Sure.
Like, now I'm sober, that's not required.
Yes.
What's the motivation to stay sober?
Okay. Mine's different to a lot of people, right? So, because mine was quite a clear, like my destruction was quite a clear case. So it's easy for me, right? And it's interesting because if you pinpointed any time in my life over the last 5 years that I was drinking, I think like if I sat down and did the pros and cons, it was pretty obvious that my drinking was a huge net negative on my life. Yeah. But then when you're in it, you somehow talk yourself into the three things that are a genuine positive, and I can go through them. You say they're so important, I can't sacrifice this, right? But then so the first month of drinking was hard, right? And I think that was legitimately because of, I don't know, it was because of addiction. And then once I was a month out, you you start really diving into the pros and cons and how much of a net negative drinking was on my life.
But particularly where? Like, where was that net negative showing up?
So I was a binge drinker, right? So it was drinking too much and doing stupid things that put everything I care about
And what do you
at
care
risk.
about in that context?
Okay. I care about having a good life, and I know that's very vague, but I mean, I can go through my values, but I want to have a happy family, happy home. I want to have enough income that I can live out. Look, I want my business to be fulfilling, and I want to have enough income that I can explore the adventures I want to explore.
Like by yourself or with people you care about?
With people I care about.
Yeah. So I won't push you. I mean, you're interviewing me, right? So I won't flip the script here. But like
Not an interview. You can question me.
Where I was going with this is that usually when we do this sort of work, we realize that it really comes down to like who we're sharing stuff with, which is the whole. It's not about you. It's about those that you care about. You know, so you can extract almost any of these things: stopping drinking alcohol, drugs, sex addiction, you name it, right? Like when you bring it down, I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, but I'm just saying my experience is usually you'll see that along the lines, it's I'm doing this for my kids or my partner or my parents or my siblings or people I care about. And when we can flip that thing to it's not about you, it's about those that care about you or you care about them, a strange thing can happen in our brains where all of a sudden it can either shift from guilt, in my case, which is weird. Like I used to feel guilty for doing things that were good for me. In my case, that can help. Or if you're a person that struggles to find motivation to train or to eat well or to not drink, it can shift it away from you to them, right? So it's really just a reframe if you need it. If you're listening to this podcast and you're like super disciplined, super organized, take care of yourself amazingly, and you're like, what is this guy on about? Just ignore me. Like it doesn't matter. But if you're listening to this and you want to make some changes and you're struggling to make changes in how much you drink or what you eat or how you train, this can just be a rewiring of your brain that can shift some of the resistance to doing the things you know you need to do. Because everyone knows how to get six-pack abs. It's not a knowledge problem.
Well, I mean, I would argue that you could also double flip that, if that makes sense. So let's say you're somebody who is so focused on success and you go, and your thought pattern is, I'm not going to train or look after myself because that's getting in the way of me working, 15 hours a day because all I care about is success. I mean, what is the life you're trying to build? Because one way to...
Yeah, but I want to jump in there, right?
Yeah.
If you're working 15 hours a day, we know now with neuroscience and study, we know that the effective amount of hours, there's not a chance you're getting 15 hours of effective work. You're just not. No one's brain is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one part of it.
So even if you are optimizing, sorry to interrupt, but even if you are optimizing for, like, let's say you're in a phase of life where you are quite comfortable optimizing for making as much money as you can. That is the most important thing in your world right now. Like, no judgment. That's fine, right? But even then, it's unlikely you're going to be doing that completely by yourself. You're probably going to have staff. You're probably going to have business partners. It's unlikely you're going to be a single person that doesn't have people relying on you, even if it's optimizing for wealth. Okay, let's say it's your staff. If you're not exercising, if you don't have any form of meditation practice, and that doesn't have to be woo-woo. We can get into meditation now, but I'm not talking about becoming a full-on hippie. It's just like it's a quietening of the mind process. If you're drinking too much, if you're excessively overweight, you're not going to be able to show up to make as much money as you can and lead the people that are helping you make money. Like this isn't a judgment thing. It doesn't have to be family. It's just this thing when you realize, shit, if I'm overweight, if I'm not exercised, my ability to show up and do whatever it is that I want to do is diminished.
Yes. Okay, let me finish my point because I didn't get there. So what I was saying, like you can flip it to self-care for the people around you, but also you can double flip it and say it'll maintain the relationships around me because I see so many people get to the success level, but they've got miserable relationships at home, right? And I would argue, what's the point of having success at business if you go home and you don't have a peaceful home? So the self-care for me, also, like I see the importance of maintaining those relationships and maintaining the strong I guess, going to sound like a right winger here, family unit, because I'm like, what's the whole point of me building the business if my relationships are home and I'm not, I don't have a strong bond with my family?
Exactly, man.
Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Naval Ravikant really sums it up beautifully. He says, you've probably heard me say this, but I think the words he uses are a home full of love, a healthy mind, and a fit body. These are things that money cannot buy. And that's the other thing here, is that self-care doesn't require money. Having a cold shower every morning is more than free. In fact, it's cheaper because you're not using hot water, so there's not electricity, right? It's free. You don't have to have an expensive ice bath. Doing push-ups every morning, that's free. Going for a walk, it's free. Meditating is free. Anybody can do this. Anybody. You can do this if you're in prison. In fact, Nelson Mandela, like a lot of these guys, like that's where they learned these things, right? Like this is not a thing for the rich. In fact, there are no barriers to this other than your own getting in your own way, which is where this sort of came from, is if you can't do it for yourself, do it for those that care about you. It's a very powerful thing, not the words, but when you can internalize that. So fast forward a whole bunch of years, I wake up 5 o'clock every morning. I never want to. Every single morning, I'm like, oh, wish I could sleep in. But I get out of bed because it's not about me. It's about my kids. It's about my wife. It's about the people who depend on me. It's about my family. It's about my parents who we support, right? I do a workout. I get in a ridiculously cold body of water. I have a sauna. I don't want to do any of these things. It's not like I get excited to do them. But what makes me do them is the identity and the person that I want to become and those that depend on me. There's nothing noble about this. There's nothing complicated about this. But it's about for me anyway, it's about a constant, like, why am I doing this?
Why do you emphasize the fact that there's nothing noble about it?
Because I think people put themselves on a pedestal when they say exactly what I've just said. Some people are going to be listening to this going, what an arsehole, saying how amazing he is. I'm really not amazing. My default mode is to procrastinate. It's to be lazy. It's not to work out. It's to eat terribly. That's my default mode. So really what I'm saying is if I can do this, anyone can do this. Like anyone, right? It's just a reframing.
So what are the biggest needle movers?
I believe and observe and have experienced that it's less about what you do and who you want to become. So the reframing of like, I am somebody that trains every morning is far more powerful than I need to train today. Actually adopting a new identity, because a lot of people will subconsciously or consciously go, I am someone that drinks beer every night. It's just what I do. I am not someone that works out. I am not someone that gets up at 5 a.m. I am not someone that can get into the call. And you know what? If you say you're not that person, you're not going to be that person. Henry Ford, I think it was, said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. So who are you? Who do you want to become? Not what do you do, right? You're going to have a whole bunch of things in your life where you've been told X. Hopefully they're positive. Hopefully you've had people around you saying you can do this. But unfortunately and sadly, more people have been told they can't, or they're not that, or they're not good enough, or they're not enough.
Yeah.
If not verbally, emotionally.
Yeah.
So I think the needle mover is you actually get to that. You get to choose who you are.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings, it slightly relates to this, is a lack of confidence killed more dreams than a lack of competence ever did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right.
Correct.
You know.
Doing the prep for this interview, something stood out. And you wrote in the prep sheet, undiagnosed but very clearly ADD. Now I'm very curious because as part of EO, I think every second person I spoke to goes, I'm very ADD. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I grew up, I was born in 1982, so I grew up in that era where I think they used to call it hyperactivity. Like basically if you were a difficult kid, you were labeled as hyperactive. So when I was, I think, 11 years old, the school that I was at basically said to my parents, hey, put him on Ritalin or he's out. And to this day, I'm super grateful that my parents said, well, we're not putting him on Ritalin, so I guess he's out.
Why? Why are you grateful for that?
This is going to get into territory now, which I don't know if it's useful, but I'm not a psychiatrist, nor do I have huge amounts of chemical and chemistry knowledge or any of these things, but I have a pretty high degree of conviction that medication for those kinds of things should be used far, 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 far less generously than it is.
Yeah.
My observation is difficult kid, give them drugs to make it easy for the teacher, right?
Yep.
Which I get. Teaching must be really tough. My God,
well, it's not just for the teacher; it's for the other students.
For the other students, all those things, right? So, it's impossibly difficult. I'm not going to sit here. I'm grateful extremely grateful, because to this day, my dad particularly, his view on this was, I don't think he's hyperactive, because, in fact, I got assessed, actually, and to this day, it's quite funny. My case is a case study at a university because it doesn't make any sense. They're like, this kid's clearly pretty difficult, clearly very disruptive, but he's definitely not hyperactive. So what the hell is going on here? There's like a weirdness to my case, which has made my life quite challenging, but there's a superpower in there as well, I think. So what my dad did from the age of 9 years old when these conversations started, instead of shoving me full of medication to just get me to conform, he taught me to meditate. So at the age of 9, he would sit and meditate with me, which I thought was torture. Like I was like, what the hell? Like, what is going on with this weird dude just getting me to meditate? But he would just sit up with me and he would just do breathing exercises, and he would talk with me sometimes through the whole night when I'd gotten into trouble at school. And at the time, I was like, oh my God, can these lectures just stop? But now in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, that is like the most amazing parenting, just being fully present, consistent, and just there to talk through things. He taught me about self-observation. He taught me about meditation. And this was this is in 1991. Like, this was not common stuff, right? So these days we call it ADHD or ADD, right? And maybe I'll get diagnosed, maybe I won't. I don't really care, right? Like, I won't take medication. I just don't want to. Maybe it's my stubbornness. Maybe it's my ego. I don't know. But the reason why I say I'm undiagnosed is just listening to me speak. You can probably hear I'm just like all over the place, and I'm very, very quick in it, not in an intelligence way, but I'm just like scattered. This, that, this, the next thing, this, all over the place, right? Which makes my life quite difficult, because the way that it shows up for me is, on the positive side, when I'm interested in something, I have like a near photographic memory. Like, I just absorb information and it's just there. When I'm not interested in something, if my life depended on it, I can't retain information. So I have no control over this. So I never studied at school. I literally didn't have my textbooks for my final year. Literally, I'm not kidding. So what I would retain, I would retain. What I didn't, I didn't. I never went to university. But I retain a ton of information about things I care about. So this is tricky. It's amazing in some instances, but it's really, really hard when I'm not interested in something, when I don't have a passion about it. Literally, if there was a gun to my head to study and retire, I just couldn't. I couldn't do it, right? So it's made my life quite tricky, because I really struggle to focus, really struggle to focus. I really struggle to see things through.
Yeah.
So I'm really good at starting things, getting people motivated, getting people to move, breathing life into something. I'm terrible at crossing the T's and dotting the I's on an ongoing basis. I'm really bad at it, which means things...
Yes. I did a personality test recently, and I scored extremely high on risk-taking, extremely high on variety-seeking, and the lowest possible on process-driven.
Yeah.
I would imagine you'd be somewhere similar in there.
Yeah, I see the value and I love it, and I get people started. And a lot of the work that I do, we've worked together in a business context, is around process and systems, what have you, but don't ask me to implement them. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what to do, I'll get you excited about it, I'll get you motivated, but don't ask me to do it, right?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same, and I feel a bit hypocritical in the business, right? Because I'm so... I'm as visionary as it gets, and I'm not an integrator in any sense of the word. And my leadership team. That's why I've got 3 integrators, that work with me.
But that's the thing, right?
Yeah,
because
correct.
The self-awareness then leads to that. So my self-awareness took a long time. You're younger than me. Thank God you're seeing it before I did. But I needed people around me, which took me a long time to realize this, that were better operationally than me.
Yeah.
And until I actually realized that and got off my own ego thinking I'm great operationally, it was hard. It was just hard. I just wasn't good at business until I realized, oh, wow, that's what a real operator looks like. That's what a real implementer looks like. So it's about self-awareness, right? Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. As cheesy as that sounds, that's a really, really important part of life. In the Oracle of Delphi, that's literally what it said over the top, is know thyself. It's not a
What's
small
the Oracle
thing.
of Delphi?
It's one of the sort of mythological sources of wisdom and knowledge, right? Apparently the Oracle of Delphi I mean, go and check your history, but like knew everything kind of thing, like the wisest. An oracle literally means, source of knowledge or wisdom. And this whole like self-knowledge thing is really, really important. It's what you've just spoken about. I recently did an assessment, very high risk taking, very high diversity seeking, or very, what did you call it?
Variety
seeking. The stuff's important to know through your life because it also changes. I used to have a huge risk tolerance, like huge, off the charts, right? At one stage, 95% of my net worth was in crypto.
Yeah.
Right. Now I'm 42, kids are getting a little bit older. We support my parents. My risk tolerance is very, very different, right? So your seasons and your phases of life change as well. And it's really important and helpful to be constantly like looking at yourself. Who am I? This is back to the identity thing.
Yeah.
So you'll identify now, I can hear the way you just spoke, I am someone who takes risks.
Correct.
I am someone that looks for diversity. So then your actions are going to follow that and you're going to use your environment to support that.
Yeah, I guess as long as you can frame that in a positive way as well.
But you get to choose it, Luke.
Yeah.
Because you could just as easily choose that I am somebody who avoids risk. I am somebody that likes consistency. And then you look for areas in your life to support that and habits and behaviors to support that. The thing is, I think a lot of us don't realize that your identity is a choice. So if you're listening to this and you've grown up in a tough environment where you think I'm talking nonsense, like generally your identity is going to be the result of a bunch of experiences you've had, things you've been told, and thoughts that you have.
There's so many ways I can go here. There's so many things popping into my head. But I mean, I've seen firsthand a lot of people that the problem is once you start doing like deep self-help or deep self-work, I've seen a lot of people that identify with basically like I'm a broken person, and they take a spiral into this, I'm broken and everything, and all the conversations you have with them is like, oh, I'm damaged because of this, or when this happened, and I'm doing this therapy and I can't do anything else. Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess it sounds like what you're saying is you need to identify that and choose not to let that.
Yeah. So let me just be clear. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist, but I do speak to business owner operators, CEOs, founders all day, every day, right? Of various degrees, like from small businesses up to quite big businesses. And my observation is that your identity is a choice. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong about this. I'm not belittling anybody's suffering or pain or experiences. But I've observed that, I've got clients that have had horrific childhoods, like horrific. And they've chosen over time to not let that define them. They've chosen a different identity. They haven't even called it this. I've just watched what they've done. They've chosen to say, I am somebody that, and the following of that sentence is a positive statement. That alone is useless. Like me, I think like affirmations in the mirror, they're not useful in and of themselves. In fact, to be honest, I hate affirmations. When I say affirmations, it just makes me feel like shit.
It's kind of what you're talking about though, isn't it?
Kind of, but there's an extension on that affirmation. When you're saying an affirmation, I am someone that, and then you actively look for evidence. There's a shift. In fact, you and I were at an event recently with, I can't remember her name, an EO event. And that was the only thing I took from that whole talk, which was very helpful. She studied at MIT, she's a neuroscientist, and that's what she actually said. And there was a kicker moment there for me, saying the affirmation on itself is fine. Maybe it helps you, maybe it doesn't. But when we can say, let me give you a real vulnerable example. Something right now that I'm working around in terms of identity is this phrase that I heard that I love, which is, I am somebody that I want my son to be like and my daughter to be with. Now, let me just be clear. I don't actually want my kids to be like me. They must be their own people. And I actually don't want my daughter to be with someone like me. But it means something to me, right? So there's a phrase there that says, I'm someone that I basically want my children to be proud of.
Yeah.
Okay. When I say that, immediately what pops up is a whole lot of doubt. Oh, but you fuck around here and you procrastinate there and you've done that bad thing and this horrible thing and this weak thing and this hedonistic thing. But if I can make that statement in the morning and then stop for 30 seconds and just look for evidence of doing things that actually support that identity, there's an amazing thing that happens in your brain, right? It's a reinforcing thing. So when we can say, I am someone who, and even if there's a bunch of evidence to support that you're not that person right now, if you're actively looking for evidence to support that that's who you're becoming, you can create this new identity, which can be an exceptionally powerful thing. You spoke about alcohol earlier. There's a lot of stuff around, I think particularly stopping smoking more than alcohol, but it's the difference between saying, I'm going to stop smoking and I am a non-smoker is very different.
Yeah, look, I actually had a conversation with my wife Jess. I wanted, because I don't know, I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but I wanted to start saying, instead of I quit drinking, that I'm sober, right? And that meant something to me, right? Because it meant to me admitting that I had a problem, right? Because the majority of conversations, like, and for me to be able to say that to people, I'm sober. No, I had a problem. It means when they turn around and try to push me to continue drinking, they're actually being an arsehole. It's like, no, I've had a problem. I've identified that this was a huge issue in my life. It was probably going to end up destroying my life. I can tell you why. But so I'm sober now. And that was just a big mind shift for me. And that's one of the many things that made it a lot easier moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. And that's assuming an identity, right?
Yeah.
I am somebody that trains every morning. I am someone that's building a great business.
Yeah.
I am sober. I am a good dad. I am a good husband.
So how do you differentiate that between feeling like a fraud, right? Because I mean, I do identify. I identify as someone who trains every day, but I miss days. And then when I say I train every day, I feel like I'm a liar.
Yeah.
So
don't be someone who trains every day. Be someone who considers training a massively important part of their life. And then look for evidence of that.
Yeah.
I am someone who trains every day is a task-based thing. I am someone that is an Ironman, or I am someone that values training, or I am someone that consistently trains. Then you can stop on a day where you've missed it and you can go, hold on, where's the evidence that I am someone who values training? The evidence is there. I went for a hard walk with Mike on Friday. I got up and ran on Saturday. I did nothing and laid in bed on Sunday. Got up on Monday and trained. There's a bunch of evidence. Okay, I am someone that really values training. Can you see the difference?
Yeah.
Like, this is a silly example, but not so silly. And this can extend to anything. If you're a shitty husband or a shitty wife or a shitty son or a shitty, whatever you are, right now, you can shift this right now. And you can say, like, let me take it on myself. Like, I've never hit my kids or anything like that, but sometimes I lose my shit and I scream at them and I can see they get scared. And my primary role as a dad is to keep my children safe. And yet sometimes I'm the source of them being scared. It kills me, right? But I can say to myself, I am a great father. And even if I've made a whole lot of mistakes, I can look for evidence right now of where I'm a great father and I can build on that. So I took my daughter camping over the weekend and it was amazing. There's evidence that I'm a great dad. I had almost no screen time. I was really connected with her, really dialed in, really, really, really there. There's evidence. Is there evidence to the contrary as well? Yeah, sure. But I can choose to build on that evidence. Is this making sense?
It is making sense.
It's a choice.
And what instantly pops into my head is, this is the same as mindfulness and meditation, right? It's about catching yourself when you are spiraling towards saying, I'm a piece of shit, I'm weak. It's catching yourselves in those moments and trying to reinforce the opposite.
Just something, this might sound quite out there, but my kids are at the Waldorf School, right? Which is, we won't get into that too much. Go and Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
It's quite an alternative schooling system.
Yeah,
right?
There's one in Wollonga.
Yeah, so they're at the one in the hills. So they have a very different way of thinking about education. And in the early years, it's really quite beautiful. So in kindy, I remember we went in there and they were reading the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. They're very famous, I think Swedish origin or whatever. And they're really stereotypical. They're the whole the damsel gets rescued by the man.
I think these are the German ones. These are my childhood.
I think they're German, yeah.
Yeah, with the lady with the long nails.
There's a whole lot of them. Anyway. Yeah, so the Hans Christian Andersen, they're mega, mega, mega well known. Right. And they're really stereotypical. It's the woman is in distress, the man comes and saves the woman, and they sail off into the sunset.
Yes.
And there's a baddie somewhere. There's a monster or a witch or something.
And they're really brutal.
Yeah. But they're very stereotypical, right?
Yep.
And my wife was, she went to the teacher and she said, I'm just surprised. You didn't have a problem, but she's like, this is weird because you guys talk so much about equality and all these things, but you're giving these really stereotypical, there's a strong man, there's a weak woman sort of vibe. And it was really interesting. Wendy, who's the teacher, who's this lovely, senior in years teacher, said, oh, no. What we're teaching in these Hans Christian Andersen fables is that every one of those characters is one person, that they exist within one person. So the strong savior, the weak victim, the monster, the saint, the sinner, they're all one person. They're parts of one person. And the message is that we all have the capacity to do pure evil and pure good and everything in between. And it really sunk in going, wow, that's actually quite profound. It's not saying these are different people. These are archetypes within all of us. And all of us, I believe, with no evidence and no data, just experience, we have the capacity to do the entire spectrum of things in our lives. Terrible, horrific shit that you've done, all the way through to altruistic, amazingly kind and generous stuff that you've done and no one even knows about it, and everything in between. It exists in all of us. And I think for me that's quite liberating, actually, because if you've done some bad shit, well, you're human. So this is the first day of the rest of your life, every day. Sam Harris speaks about this, and I love it. It's very powerful, where he says, just begin again. If you have to do that 50 times a day, do it 50 times a day. But just begin again. And I find that liberating. When you fuck up, whatever that means to you, right now, the next moment, begin again. Mm-hmm. And do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And these are choices. I think the main message I'm trying to get across here is this is not reserved for quote unquote good people or wealthy people or people that have grown up in an amazingly beautiful home life or spiritually enlightened people. Or it's not reserved. It's really, really simple. It's accessible to everyone. That doesn't make it easy.
So how does one choose not to define themselves by their past, right? So let's say, people that have done or have had horrible pasts, right? And I guess it's very easy to let that shape your life, and very easy to let that shape your life. So how do you let that not shape your life, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. I'll give you my experience and my opinion, but I just want to really be clear. I'm not a psychologist or a therapist, and if you're listening to this and you are defined by your past, you should probably find the right kind of help. But my experience of having a lot of really intense, deep conversations with people who are, to the world, super successful and have their shit together, which is generally how you would describe most of the people I work with. On the outside, I get to these conversations really fast with a lot of these people, not all of them, and get to the nub of this. So what I heard you ask was, if you define yourself by some bad stuff that's happened to you, how do you change that?
Yeah, and I can tell you how I do it personally, but yeah.
Well, why don't you start by sharing and we can build on
cool.
that?
So it's the same thing as what I spoke about alcohol, right? It's actually truly understanding what's going on here. And I mean, this is going to upset some people potentially if they think I'm talking about them. But for me, it's realizing that I'm actually using that as an excuse. Okay. Like and at the end of the day, I'm actually hurting myself. It's easier for me to say, oh, because of X or because of Y, this is why my life's like this. And I'm actually using that as an excuse. And there's power in realizing that, am I using that as an excuse for the people that did that to me? So they know, because I subconsciously think that, they will know that they did this to me and feel bad or something along those lines. I have trouble explaining this, but at the end of the day, realizing that I'm using it as an excuse, I want to have a good life. And the only way to have a good life is to stop using these things to prevent me from doing what I want to do. Yeah,
and that works for you, right? But I think what I'm taking from that and what I've observed is it begins with that recognition and ownership. Mm-hmm. I've got a great aunt who's just this awesome, awesome woman. She's just this really lovely human being. And she has this kind of saying that she says, she's in her 80s now, and she's like, you can blame your parents until you're 30. And I just love that wisdom. It's like at some point,
that's brilliant.
You need to take ownership of your own life, right? So she's like, blame away as much as you want until you're 30. And once you turn 30, you got to take responsibility for your life. And it's just one of those adages, which is obviously not specific, but you get what she's saying. She's like, when you're a kid, you are not responsible for yourself. But when you're an adult, that's the defining thing, is you become responsible for yourself. So you start by just acknowledging it. Hey, this really bad thing happened to me, or these really bad things happened to me. That's true. Can't change that, right? What you can take ownership of is getting clear on what parts you do have control over. You do have control over what you put in your body. You do have control over whether you exercise or not. You do have control over whether you meditate and how you sleep. You have control over those things, should you choose them. Might not feel like it today, but you do. What you don't have control over is what's already happened. Right? So, again, at the risk of being oversimplistic with this, but what is the identity? Who do you want to be? What about your environment do you have control over changing? Who do you need to see more of? Who do you need to see less of? Where do you need to be around? Where do you not be around? And what habits, we spoke about the keystone habits or the fundamental habits. What are the habits that change how you feel? Because there's a really important thing to understand here is that mood or emotions follow actions, not the other way around. What do I mean by that? If you wait until you feel motivated to go to gym and work out, you might never go to gym and work out. But if you just make the decision to get off your ass and go and do 10 push-ups, what you feel follows your action.
Yeah.
You know, I remember getting to Adelaide and I was on a panel of entrepreneurs, and this young, smart woman in the crowd put up a hand and said, hey, this one's for Mike. I don't know why she singled me out, but she said, in the early days, before you were successful, how did you deal with stress? And I was like, hold on a second. Before I even answer that, are you insinuating that when you get successful in business, stress goes away? She's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, we need to talk about that, right? And my answer to her was, I'm not even going to answer you. The way I'm going to answer you is, as the business grew, and still to this day, I get so stressed so often that I literally have a protocol when I'm just overwhelmed and falling apart that I execute on to get my brain back in the game.
Yeah.
Right? And that protocol is a bunch of stuff that I do because I know that mood follows action. Right?
The majority of the number one thing that I need to focus on in the business is my control of my stress, right? So, I mean, so you spoke, I'm going to take this a bit of a different direction. You spoke before about the oversubscription of prescription of Ritalin, right? If you look at my story, as the business grew, my stress started growing and growing and growing. And I didn't know how to reduce that or deal with that, right? And I got to the point when I was having, panic attacks, complete meltdowns, et cetera, et cetera. How I dealt with that was going on antidepressants. And it was like it was an instant fix, right? So then I just built the business up further to the point where I couldn't handle the stress on antidepressants, right? And then I had to, look at other ways of kind of dealing with that. I think what I was going to say is, my biggest focus is basically on stress reduction from on a day-to-day basis.
Stress reduction or stress management, integration, right?
Yeah.
Like I have severe anxiety around money, right? Sometimes it's logical. Often it's completely outside of the realms of logic, right?
Yeah.
But I have this deep anxiety that I'm going to be completely financially destitute. It's horrible. And I go through these catastrophizing thoughts sometimes 50 times a day, right? And it's really intense. It can get to the point where I can't even formulate sentences in my brain, and yet I spend my days helping very high-performing people be better. And sometimes in my brain, I'm like, I don't know how to put a sentence together, and yet I've got to somehow show up for these people who are really working deeply with me, right? It can be really, really intense and really lonely and really hard, right? And here's the interesting thing. I don't ever want to get rid of my anxiety because it's there for a reason. Anxiety is a form of fear, just as an example. That fear keeps us alive. If we didn't have any fear at all, we would be dead within an hour of living. We would, walk out and step in front of a car because we'd wanted to see what would happen. Fear and anxiety is a mechanism to keep us alive.
Yeah.
It's why it's there. But like almost everything in life, it's nuanced and it's not that simple. So anxiety at a 0 is a problem. You will die in a few minutes of being alive because you just, you'll stick your hand on a hob, or you'll walk out in front of a car, or whatever silly example. You'll jump out of an airplane with no parachute because you're just curious and you have no fear. Like it serves us too much and it debilitates us. So for me, it's about changing my relationship to that anxiety. So as weird as this sounds, like that anxiety causes me immense suffering at times, immense suffering, okay? I've been told time and time and time again that I should be on medication by doctors, by psychiatrists, by even my wife at one point. Like, you need to be medicated, dude, right? And maybe they're wrong. Maybe I should. But I try to be grateful for this anxiety as well, because the fact of the matter is I am where I am, which means that whatever I've experienced has gotten me here. It's a fact.
Yes.
I'm here. It's a fact. No one can argue that, right? But does it serve me going forward? Mm-hmm. Right?
Could I ask what the resistance was towards the medication?
I think there's a fair amount of conditioning there. Like my dad particularly, my mom as well, but my dad particularly, I guess, has instilled in me, he's never said these words, but that medication is bad for this stuff.
So all
why
that's
is it bad?
in me is medication is weak.
Not weak. No,
I'm saying for me,
Yeah, for
that's
you.
what it was instilled with me. So it was such a head fuck.
Yeah.
Because it got to the point where I felt like I needed it, and I just felt even more weak and like a failure.
Which continues that cycle.
Correct.
So where I do agree with my dad is he doesn't say weak. Definitely not. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting a bit esoteric, and this might not be useful to people, and this is just opinion. But I really do have conviction that whatever suffering we're going through in our lives, it's there for us to learn something. And I also have conviction, and this is not based on evidence, this is just a weird experience thing, that until we learn what we need to learn from that thing, it will not go away. That's just been like my life experience, right?
It's kind of a Buddhism view, isn't it? That you're constantly stuck in these cycles, and once you can progress through, the next cycle begins.
I mean, Buddhism takes that into your entire life. We don't have to go there now, right?
Correct.
That's reincarnation, right?
Yep.
But we're not going to go there now. I mean, we can, but I'm no expert. But I do have a strong sort of sense that this anxiety for me, it's the thing that I need to learn how to deal with in my life. That's like the thing. Everything else is like easy in comparison to this for me. And this is my I don't know, I'm not Christian, but I think the Christians call it your cross to bear. It's like your big thing in life to get over. Usually people have like one massive thing, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is mine. I'm not religious at all, just to be clear, but I quite like that thinking. So if I go and take a whole bunch of medication, or in fact, maybe medication, maybe it's like cocaine, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's a sex addiction. Like I kind of put them all in the same category. If I do anything to numb that, I'm robbing myself of the ability to learn from it, to get through it. It's easy, short term. Long term, doesn't help. I've done a ton of work on this, and that's true for me. Like I've worked on this intensely, and I've been tested time and time again. Most recently, shared with you, I was hacked and I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let me just be clear about this. I'm not worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. Like for me to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's very, very real. So I don't want to be flippant about this. If you're listening to this going, someone who says that they're okay after losing hundreds of thousands of dollars must be worth millions and millions and millions and millions. That's not the case for me. This is very significant to me. I'll paint the picture for the listeners because you know the story. It's a Sunday. I've taken my kids down to the beach. We've had a great swim. It's really kind of like an idyllic day. And I get home, and I've been involved in crypto for a long time. So I understand it quite well, and I've sort of been quite a significant investor, significant for me for a long time. I don't really trade at all. I just buy stuff and I hold it. I wanted to do something, so I get home on a Sunday. Everyone's sun-kissed and everything's great, and it's a pretty awesome Adelaide summer day. This is in January. And I go and log into my cold storage wallet, which has got a ton of security around it. I kind of do everything right. And where there should be a balance of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's a balance of $1,000. And I'm like, oh, this happens quite often. Upgrade the firmware, just make sure it's right, but it doesn't change. I'm like, what's going on here? Go into the transaction list, and I see in December, over the space of about 4 minutes, the entire thing has just been drained, and it's gone, right? So hundreds of thousands of dollars are gone. Now, to be clear, to put this in context, this doesn't change my day-to-day living. Like, I've still got a house, I've still got a family, still afford groceries. It actually has zero impact on my, right now, but it puts me back very, very significantly, years. Puts me back years, right? This is not money I can afford to lose. The next 3 hours were, ridiculous. I went through the entire range of emotion, from anger to fear to doubt to acceptance. I had the total range of emotions of grief. And then a really weird thing happened. You know, that kind of incident would have and has before set a brain like mine off on just a terrible spiral of fear, like debilitating fear. And that did happen for a few hours. But then a weird thing happened, and I just went like super calm. And I actually became like super focused. And I thought that this was just like a stress response. But a day went by and it remained. And 2 days went by and it remained. And a week went by and it remained. And 2 weeks later, I had to fly to South Africa for a business trip, and it remained. And still remains. Since then, I've started a business, launched a business. I've really performed in the two other things that I'm heavily involved with. And this, I think, is the result of just years and years and years and years of working on what Viktor Frankl speaks about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, where there's a beautiful line where he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies freedom and understanding. Now, most of us will get a stimulus, whatever that is. Someone says something, someone does something, we hear something, we see something, we think something. That's a stimulus. And there's no gap. We just go immediately into reactivity. I want to drink. I get cross. I get angry. I get nervous. I take drugs, drink alcohol, look at porn, whatever the hell your vice is, right? And then the spiral just continues. But actually, we have a choice. There's a space there. There is a space there. And if we can create that space, our lives can change dramatically. But it's very difficult to do this on your own without support, without conversation, without people around you that can even have this conversation. Right? And this is where I think networks of people, communities of people, being intentional about your environment matters so much. You know, Luke, I know your story, and you've made a lot of very intentional environmental changes that support this identity of I am sober.
Yeah.
They're intentional because if you're around people that are constantly bringing that identity down, it's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
If you go and work in a pub when you're trying to be sober, you're making it hard for yourself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
but how does that work in? So you know, let's use your example. How do you change your environment to make yourself not lose your absolute mind? I mean, what environment are you putting yourself into to eliminate that response, right? So, yeah, let's say that happened to me 2 years ago, and things like that have happened to me, not to that extent, but you know, let's say one of my clients goes under, and I've lost, you know, tens of thousands of dollars before, and when I was drinking, that looked like me coming home and drinking 3 bottles of red wine.
Yeah,
right. And one of the hardest things about getting sober was realizing all of the things that alcohol was doing positive for me. By that I mean, you know,
numbing you
from that high level of anxiety that comes from extreme stress of running a business and other aspects of my life.
Yeah.
So how do you create the environment to not let yourself spiral?
I'm going to push you on, I'm going to dig into this.
Yeah.
I just heard you say, I've been in a situation where I've lost tens of thousands of dollars in business. I would come home, drink 3 bottles of red wine because it would numb me and allow me to get through the night.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think about, at the end of this podcast, it's in the morning. I think you're going to go to work today, or at least you're going to look at your emails. Somebody from your business says to you, Luke, we've lost a client. You've just lost tens of thousands of dollars. Now, with your new identity that you've assumed, you don't use those words, it's me putting words on what you've done. What do you do today if that happens?
Yeah, so my go-to tool to deal with those situations is mindfulness. Okay, so this is why I meditate. I know a lot of people meditate for different reasons. Mine is the mindfulness that I get from it. It's a lot of my meditation focuses on what my body's feeling, right?
So I want to interrupt because I want to push you. Like, actually walk me through this. So I want you to think about, we finish this podcast, you get an email from, I happen to know the people, so I won't name them.
Yep.
What do you actually do?
I feel myself rage up, and what that looks like is the back of my neck. I start getting a headache, and I go, okay, you are feeling the response of anger, stress, anxiety, fear.
So self-awareness?
Yes, so awareness.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you name and you acknowledge it.
Yes.
You don't try and push it away.
Well, I do try to feel and release it.
Yeah,
Okay?
which is different to denying it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what do you do?
So first of all, what am I feeling? Is this helpful to deal with the practical situation in any way, shape, or form? Is this going to lead to me being the person I want to be?
Identity.
Yep. And does this help you? Does
Yeah.
it, like so?
But what do you
so
do?
anger is that's it. So realizing it and breathing and letting it go. I know that sounds simple, but a lot of it comes. It's the same as, it's like taking the red pill, in the Matrix, right?
Yep.
I want the red pill every time. That helps me deal with everything in my life, right? So it's.
And how did you get there? Because I want to push you because I want to answer your question, but I'm trying to get you to answer your own question. So you said, tell me, like, how do you change your environment to change this was your question, right? So what did you change about your environment to get you there? What around, like, the people you spend time with, the stuff you put in your body, the stuff you put in your brain, what did you take control of that allowed you to get to be able to do that versus just necking 3 bottles of red wine? Who, where, what?
Well, a lot of it was realizing that the Luke who would neck 3 bottles of red wine is not capable of living the life I want to live, right? So it's identifying what life I want to live. I want to be happy with my family, all the things we spoke about earlier, right? And that, like, if you look at my behavior and look at what I want, that behavior is not going to get that outcome. So it's about exploring other ways to get that outcome. What does that look like? It's about making friends and building relationships with people that want the same thing. And,
right.
And how does it want for them? Like, I've got a friend.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, sure.
Was that part, right?
Yeah. So and the reason that, like, I've got a friend who has 400 staff, right? And he's a CEO, and he calls it, the way he put it, and he's extremely into Buddhism. And he said Buddhism has allowed him, and meditation has allowed him to stand in a hurricane and feel calm and happy. So hearing that triggered me to start learning more about meditation and learning more about Buddhism. So that's how that arose.
So let's come back to your question around the environment. Let's get practical about this. I know you, so I can tell you some of the stuff you've done because I've observed it and I know you.
Yeah.
You've surrounded yourself with people who will give you a different response to what you were used to, right? So if we surround ourselves with a whole bunch of people who will all drink 3 bottles of red wine every time they get stressed, guess what? We're going to drink 3 bottles of red wine every time we get stressed.
Yeah, because in a way, I naturally thought, this is what you do when you lose 20 grand.
This is normalized, right?
Yeah.
If you surround yourself, not with judgmental, snooty, white-collar pricks, that's not what I'm saying. You surround yourself with people who have a different normal set of behaviors, with people who go, hey, you're stressed. Let's go and, I don't know, jump in the water, in the sea. Let's go for a run.
March and walk up Mount Lofty.
Come on the Mike Scott's March and walk up Mount Lofty. It's probably the biggest factor, I think, in my observation is who you default to around these things. So, for example, just having one single person, even if you're paying them, that when that happens, that stimulus, that would normally kick off the bad set of behaviors. And by the way, it's not always as obvious as drugs or alcohol. Sometimes it's like self-loathing. Sometimes it's self-hurting, self-harming. If you have one person that you can pick up the phone and go, I'm spiraling, I'm scared, I'm lost. And they can just go, hey, I'm not here to solve you. I don't even know what to say to you, but I'm here with you. Can literally save lives, right? And change behavior. And jump in if you want to.
Well, I wanted to jump in and say, I mean, I'm getting better at that now, but if you there was such a big fear in me of appearing weak that I would not be able to speak about any of this, right? And so it would look like me retracting. It would look like, this is the main cause, I think, of my alcoholism, right? It's like, because, so it's, I don't know.
But it's so ironic because it takes such courage to be vulnerable. Brené Brown.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I love framing it like that because...
Have you read Brené Brown's work?
No, I don't even know who it is.
Oh, man. That's her. So she's a PhD as far as I know. She's just incredible. So her whole work is around vulnerability, okay? And she's just articulate and she's awesome. And she has this amazing thing that she says is she has spoken now to probably... she's definitely reached millions, tens of millions of people, but she's actually spoken in front of, physically, to like tens of thousands of people. And she has this thing that she likes to sort of show off with, and I hope I get the words with. Show off is the wrong word. That she likes to make a point. She'll go to like the U.S. Marine Corps, like the toughest motherfuckers on the planet, like the baddest, toughest dudes. And she'll say to them, and she says, to this day, the answer has always been no. And the question she'll ask the not baddest, but the toughest guys who've seen the most hardcore stuff is she'll say, is it possible to be vulnerable without showing courage? And the answer is always no.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is an act of courage, not weakness. I'm 6'5", white dude from South Africa, right? My default mode is like, be strong, be like, just grit your teeth and get through it. That's my whole like nature is pulling me in that direction. So when I can sit and go, I'm scared, I'm lost, I'm sorry, I don't know. It's fucking terrifying for me to do that as an archetype. Especially when a lot of my career has been, but Mike, you're supposed to have the answers. You're the leader, you're the founder, you're the successful guy, all this bullshit, right? And I go like, no, I'm scared. I don't know. It's not possible to be vulnerable without being courageous. And the degree to which you show vulnerability is the degree to which you're courageous. Her work is outstandingly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, what pops up in my head is, I think when you look into, the more, I guess, tough, and that's in square quotes, cultures who aren't vulnerable in any way, shape or form, that's when you start seeing higher rates of alcoholism, and dealing with their problems that's very interesting.
It's very confronting as a dude.
Yeah.
And the more sort of conventional or stereotypical you've been raised, this is going to be more or less uncomfortable, right? Because you start to look at this and go, oh, wow, courage is not pretending you're strong and never admitting weakness. That's not courage. Courage is acknowledging the weakness and having the willingness to work on it, acknowledging the pain, acknowledging the fear. I had somebody, I was on a podcast, quite a massive podcast actually, and it's got a huge reach, this podcast. And we were talking about imposter syndrome, right? And I was talking about how much imposter syndrome I've got, right? If you don't know what imposter syndrome is, if you're listening, it's this feeling that everybody's being fooled by you and you're going to be found out as an imposter. And when you get found out as an imposter, the whole world's going to come crashing down on you because everyone thinks you know what you're doing, but you're like, how the hell am I fooling everybody, right? And it's just this constant feeling. I have this all the time. I'm just like, what am I possibly going to add value to these people or to this person every time? It's a spectrum. We won't go too much down there. But a woman in fact, a lot of people reached out after that episode. And one particular woman, very high performing woman, really pretty hardcore. And she wanted to work with me as a coach. And she said, and when anybody reaches out to me to work as a coach, I basically just don't talk about myself. I just say, what would be useful for you to know? Because it's not about me, it's about them. And she said, oh, good question. And she thought, and she said, what's one insight you've had from coaching all of these people that might not be conventional? And I said, oh, that's easy. And I think she was expecting me to come up with some like really smart hack for success or something. And I said, the insight is that just about all of us are barely holding our shit together most of the time. Bear in mind, I generally coach pretty successful business people. And she just started laughing. And she's like, oh my God, yes. Like that's actually what I needed to hear and I didn't even realize it. Right.
So, I mean, that was my biggest learning from being in Forum, right? I used to think everybody was successful because they didn't have any problems. And, people are successful in spite of their problems, not because they don't have any.
Yeah.
So.
And strength takes on a different definition. One of my favorite poems in the world is by Rudyard Kipling, and it's called If. Very, very, very powerful poem. And one of the lines in that poem is, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs. That line is the same as what your mate said who's got 400 staff. Be calm in the whirlwind. The thing is, you don't do that by being quote unquote strong, and you do that by acknowledging what you're feeling, vulnerability, admitting where you're weak, where you're strong, and then doing what needs to be done. But trying to do that as an island is just so much harder.
Yeah.
This is the environment thing. When I was in my late 20s, I did a weird thing, which is kind of socially not very acceptable. But typical thing. I grew up in Cape Town, beautiful city, very social city. You know a lot of people there. It's like it's a people-centric city. Okay, so I had tons and tons and tons of friends, like everybody does in those spaces. And for some reason, I don't know why, I just felt very unfulfilled. So I did a little bit of like an audit, which is a weird thing. But I looked at all my mates, all my friends, and I was like, I know whatever. Pick a round number, I don't know, 50 people that I spend time with, right? And the reality is, if I ask myself just about all of them, I'd be like, why am I friends with this person? And the answer for almost all of them would be because I've been friends with them for 20 years. That was the only answer. But if I looked at it, when we hung out, we were just drinking the same beer, having the same conversation over the same, we call them braais, you call them barbecues, over the same braais.
Call them what?
Braai. It's
Okay.
an Afrikaans word. Barbecue. It's a barbecue, right?
Cool. Yep.
Except we don't cook with gas. What the hell, man? Open flame. Another conversation.
Yeah.
And that wasn't enough for me. And then I would take another step further and go, am I adding value to that person's life, and are they adding value to me? And the answer was no for just about all of them, right? So it sounds like really hectic, but I just culled like 90% of the people I hung out with. Not in a hectic way. I just stopped making an effort. So I wouldn't invite them, and when they responded to me, I just sort of politely declined. Most of them didn't even notice that we stopped being friends. Case in point, one or two of them got quite offended, and I had these difficult conversations going, hey, like why are we doing this? I don't think I'm adding value to you. I don't think you're adding value to me, because all we do is talk about rugby and beer. That's boring to me
So
now.
what do you mean by value?
Yeah, great question, right? And it's going to be very subjective, but the person that you're becoming, your identity,
That you are not, your relationship with them is not moving you in a direction that you want to be moving into.
This
So
is
it
the
goes
environment.
towards what I said before. This is what I want in life. This is where I am. And this relationship is not pushing me in that direction.
this is who I want to become.
Yep.
Words are important. This is the environmental
Okay,
factor.
so why is that important to say this is who I want to become, not this is the life I want?
It's important to me. I'm not telling you it's not important to you. But to me, centering around who I want to become is far more meaningful than any any external factors. Then we can look at our environment. So if I want to become a person that, enter whatever you want to become, then the people that I spend my time with is a massive factor around that. These people, I didn't articulate it like this back then, but now I can see it quite clearly that that's what was happening intuitively as I was going, I want to become that person. In your words, I want to move in that direction. These people are pulling me in that direction. I don't want to go in that direction. I have control over this. A lot of people don't realize this. Like, I have a choice. I don't have to be friends with those people just because I've been friends with them for 20 years. It's just not true,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't like a hectic decision where I phoned people and said, I'm not your friend anymore. That's not how this played out. It just stopped, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 conversations, which were awkward, with people like, what the hell, Mike? Like, we've been friends for 20 years. And I'd be like, I'm like, honestly, dude, do I add any value to your life? Of course you do. Tell me how. Well, we hang out. And I'm like, yeah, we drink the same beer we've been drinking since school. Same conversations. That's not valuable to me, and it's not valuable to you. And then you leave them to do whatever they want to do. Now
Yeah,
I'm
well-
super intentional around who I spend my time with,
Yep.
right? And it's not a lot of people. I'm a difficult dude. That doesn't help. I'm not an easy person to hang around. Like, I'm intense. I don't do small talk ever. I can't. I hate it. I just zone out. I'm intense. But I'm actually okay with that now, because I'm not for everybody. But those that I am for, I've got very deep relationships. And not a lot of people. It's a handful of people.
Okay, so let's go back to that moment, right? So you're 3 hours in, and the switch flips, and you're okay. Am
We're
I
talking about the loss of all this
the
money.
loss of all the money?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, am I correct in saying that's happened because you've built an environment, you've become the person, and that's going to be okay? Because you've spent years developing, I guess, the atmosphere around you.
I have no fucking idea why it happened, man. I'm not going to pretend, but
No.
I'll share an experience. There's a woman that I speak to every now and then, and I won't bore you with details. She's just old and wise, and I like her. I phoned her when this happened, and she's been part of my journey for a long time. And I said, this happened, and what the fuck's going on? I'm fine. I'm more than fine. In fact, what happened a couple of hours after this is my daughter walked into my office, and as cheesy as this sounds, I looked at her and I was just like, Jesus, she's like perfection. How lucky am I? I looked at my wife, who's healthy and awesome, my little boy, who's amazing, our house, my health, my fitness. And I just had this, it's almost cheesy, but I just had this absolute wave of like, the stuff that matters is awesome. This sucks that I've lost all this money and there's a whole lot of stuff I can't do. But right now, my God, like if I could print this moment and live like this for the rest of my life, it's amazing.
Yeah,
right?
well, it sounds to me that's about identifying what you want out of life and realizing you have it, right? So,
And it's also like this thing of like, there's no such thing as good or bad. It's only relative to, you know, to a super wealthy person, they would look at my life and go, God, that's depressing. To someone in South Africa,
maybe.
maybe, you're right, maybe.
Well,
Right.
it depends what they value, right? So they might be what I was talking about before, and they might be the super wealthy person who's divorced and doesn't speak to their kids because they spent their whole life building their business.
Yep. I want to come back to that, but to finish the thought on where we're going with this, what she said to me was, hey, Mike, my biggest fear is losing my loved ones, right? That's my biggest fear. But like the day-to-day thing that destroys my brain is the fear of money, losing money, be financially destitute, right? That's the biggest fear beyond losing my family. And she's like, because I told her, like, what's going on here? This has happened. And surely I should be spiraling like I normally do, but I'm actually like calm and focused. This is like almost having an opposite effect. And she laughed and she just sort of said, well, check it out. You know, your biggest fear beyond your family, which is always the thing, is losing all your money. And she's like, that's happened. Not all of it, but like a serious chunk of it, it's happened. And you're fine. Like you're telling me you're fine. So this thing has happened. It's literally done nothing. Your kids are great. You're great. Your wife's great. Your life's great. Doesn't affect you right now. You're fine. So you've kind of lived your biggest fear and you're fine, which means you've taken the sting out of it. You've taken the power away from it, which is really interesting, right? Now, it's not my biggest fear, just to be very clear, but it is the thing that pervades this brain and sends me on spirals day in and day out.
Yeah, I'm trying to connect that to my biggest fear is a weird term, right? So it's more about what drives the anxiety, and what drives the anxiety for me is, you know, I guess people thinking me not thinking I'm good enough, right? So, but like it's so easy to get rid of that illusion. You know, like I can talk myself through it, but then it just arises back up. You know what I mean? In the way I think and the way I act.
Yeah, and this stuff, like, let me be clear about this. It's not gone. Mm-hmm. It'll never be gone. But my relationship to it is changing. So I used to think I need to get rid of anxiety. It's bad because it causes suffering. Now the way that I approach it is, it's there. It's fine. I need to change my relationship to it. So sometimes I literally talk to myself, talk to my anxiety. Hey, thank you. You've kept me safe for all these years, but I'm good. Don't need you right now. Sounds crazy. Like it sounds nuts, but like choose your crazy. Do you want to be crazy and suffering and really, or do you want to be crazy and happy with a better, like you're going to be crazy either way, right? Like the human condition is crazy. Like, so sometimes I literally will go like, thank you. I see you, but I'm good. You're just trying to keep me safe. It's all good. That sounds crazy, but it's actually got some method to the madness. Is number one, what you're doing is you're going, that's interesting. Anxiety actually has a place in the world. That takes the sting away. The second thing you're doing is you're acknowledging that you are not your anxiety. You experience your anxiety. You're not your anxiety, right? And that's a very powerful thing to bring into the real world. If you take it into business, you are not your business failures. You have experienced your business failures. That distinction can be the difference between someone who fails forward, as they like to say in Silicon Valley, who fails and just sees it as a stepping stone, and someone who fails and then internalizes it and becomes a failure and not only potentially loses their business, but now identifies as a failure, right?
Yeah.
Is that separation between I'm experiencing this horrible thing versus I am this horrible thing.
Yeah, I mean, so I use the same tool. So one of my big, what I'm trying to do with my life now is be able to enjoy kind of what I've built and enjoy the time with my kids, right? But what creeps in there is my need to do more work and be more successful, right? So, you know, and this is another thing that's since I've stopped drinking that I've had to deal with. And what I do is when I'm sitting on the couch enjoying my time with my kids, and it's the same as the guilt you were speaking about, the guilt of not working. I built up this persona in me, which I call Status Game Luke, who's obsessed with status. He wants to be successful, so everybody knows him as successful. I don't know why I want that. It's something that inherently pops up. I go, oh, no, thanks, Status Game Luke. You've got us to the point where you've got a nice house, you've got a nice business, but you're not required anymore. Now it's time to just relax and kind of spend time with your kids. So
it's different types of wealth, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of obsessing over this idea at the moment, and as wisdom often does, the book, I read a lot, like most people these days, and this happens a lot with me. When I start really thinking about an idea or something, I'll find a book that's like just on that topic. It's kind of amazing. So I'm reading this book called The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom, which is just articulating what's in my head, actually. It's just beautiful. And on the way here, actually, I was listening to him talking about something that was really interesting. So he's talking about time wealth. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? And he uses a really interesting example. Warren Buffett is 94 years old, and he's worth, I think, $138 billion. Okay. What's really interesting is, like, I'm 42, and he makes this good point. He says, if Warren Buffett came to you right now and said, we can change places, would you take it?
No.
It's a hard no.
Yeah.
And we don't think like this. It's just a hard no. Similarly, if Warren Buffett came to me, and if we said to him, would you change places with Mike? I'm willing to bet he would say, hard yes. And we don't think like this, though. We think that we've got all this time in the world, but we don't. Whether you're 20, 30, 15, 50, 60, 70, 80, you don't have as much time as you think you do, right? That shouldn't scare you. The Stoics speak a lot about amore fati, right? Like contemplating your death. It sounds hectic, but it's actually like, it's a liberating concept to say, like, if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, how would you live today? Now, if you're listening to this and laughing and going, oh, I'd go on a drug binge and just blah, 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 well, maybe, but just contemplate that. Like, you have less time than you think you do. What are you going to do with that information? There's no judgment.
Yeah.
I did a post on LinkedIn yesterday, which a lot of people are resonating with, right? Because I'll give you a very simple example. Australia is a big camping culture. Since we moved here from South Africa, it's crazy how big a camping culture is. It's great.
Yes.
I've been saying for, I think, 3 years now, I need to get a very quick camping setup and a car that can take us to places where we can just quickly go for an overnight camping thing with my kids. And this really is for my kids. I don't really enjoy camping that much, if I'm really honest with you. It's for them, right?
Yep.
But I've fallen into the I'll do it when I've got more time, a bit more free cash, when things aren't as hectic trap. Suddenly it's 3 years later, and guess how many camping trips I've had with my kids? Exactly 0, right? They're not going to be 4 and 9 forever. In fact, they're never going to be 4 and 9 respectively. And before I know it, they're going to be 7 and 12, and then the 12-year-old's probably not going to want to do it, and et cetera, et cetera. So I just made a decision recently, like, this is insane. I'm waiting for the right vehicle to get to Australia so that I can go off-roading, and that's going to come here in 2027, 2028. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck's wrong with your brain, Mike?
So something I've been thinking of.
So I changed it.
Yeah.
Right? I want to make this is a point, right? Because, so literally, I went and bought a vehicle pretty much overnight, right? I went and bought a whole lot of camping equipment. Now, I'm not telling you, if you listen to this, to go and max out your credit card and buy a 4x4 and go and buy camping equipment. But the reality is it the best financial decision for me right now? God, no. Can I afford it and can I actually do it? Yes. Is it going to mean I can't do some other stuff? Absolutely. But we went camping this weekend and I watched what it was doing for my daughter, and I was just like, what the hell have I been waiting for?
Yeah, correct.
I'm using this as a very tangible example, but these examples are going to be everywhere in your life.
Yeah.
Every day, every hour. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say something I've been thinking of lately, and I'd be interested to get your view on this, seeing so many business owners and founders. I think there's a switch that needs to be made, right? That needs to be made. So I think startup mode is so extremely demanding, especially if you're bootstrapping it and you've got no finance. So that leads you to work long hours, and you code that in your brain as, I need to work long hours to be successful. But then at some point, let's say like me, you start having kids and you want to actually start enjoying that. I mean, it's been such a hard thing for me mentally to make the shift of going from business building mode to actually enjoying what you've built. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And that's the guy that's the stereotypical lonely guy on his yacht with no family, right? So I was wondering what you think of that and whether you see that as a common issue in some of the people you coach.
Oh man, like pervasive, pretty much everyone, right? And myself. And there's a really powerful question which I'd urge everyone to ask of themselves listening to this now and just for the rest of their lives is, what am I optimizing for? Because most people can't answer that. If you want to make it simpler, what do you want? If you're listening to this, like, go write it down. Like, what do you want? Most people have no fucking idea.
Yeah.
Because they might say, oh, I just want $1 million. Why? Because then I can pay off my house and be happy. Why? Because if I paid off my house and be happy, then I can go camping every 6 weeks. Why? Because I want to connect more with my daughter. Cool. You don't have to wait until you've made $1 million to connect more with your daughter. You can do it right now.
Yeah, so that was the big one for me, right? It's like, why am I doing this? Because I wanted a good life with my family. And I was so stressed, right, that I wasn't present when I was at home. And that's when I was home, which was barely. So then I made the decision, but then that switch is so hard mentally to kind of recode your brain to start enjoying life.
Well, it's hard mentally if your environment doesn't support it. Back to our earlier conversation. If you surround yourself with people that's normal, it's a lot less hard. So for example, if all of your mates work 15-hour days, it's going to be really hard for you mentally to not work 15-hour days because it's not normal. If you actively seek out people that are optimizing for the same thing as what you're optimizing for, and there's no judgment here, guys. If you are optimizing for wealth above everything else, go ahead. Find people that are going to, that's fine. Just be real about what you're optimizing for, because what you don't want is what I used to do and what I've seen almost every entrepreneur do is we all use this phrase, I'm doing it for my family. But then I called bullshit on myself when I used to say that and work like a workaholic, is I would say, if I'm doing this for my family, where do they feature on my calendar? And guess what? They didn't. So what I realized is I'm saying I'm doing this for my family as an excuse to be a workaholic, which I've now come up with another phrase, which I probably stole from somebody else far smarter than myself, which is show me your calendar and I'll show you your values. So now my family does feature on my calendar. I do not work nights and weekends. I am home every single night for dinner, if not earlier. I am with my family every single weekend. I go to bed at 8:30 every night so that I can wake up at 9. I read with my daughter every night. Every month we go on a book adventure, etc., etc., etc. I want to be really clear. This is really hard for me. Left to my own devices, I will work 15-hour days and I will work over the weekend. But if my values really do reflect my family, they need to show on my calendar. If I'm training, it needs to show on my calendar. If I'm meditating, it needs to show on my calendar. So now it does.
So what does this stuff look like on a practical level, right? So how do you plan for this? How do you figure out what you want out of life? Because a lot of people, I guess what I'm getting at there is like most people, including myself, are just on autopilot and they never take that time to step aside and actually think about what they want and start changing their life.
That's how you start. Take the time, think about it. Really
how do you do that?
How so like this Friday, it happens to be this Friday. I try to do this once a month. I don't always get to it. This might sound very opulent, but I'm taking what I call a clarity day, right? So we'll do Mike Scott's March. By the way, if you're in Adelaide and you're listening to this, 5:55 a.m., Waterfall Gully Car Park, come and join. Luke will be there as well, I'm sure.
Hell yeah.
And we do a Mount Lofty Summit and we come back down, right? So that's a bit of a plug. And by the way, I want nothing from that. Just come and join us. So I'll do Mike Scott's March Friday morning. For the rest of the day, I'm going to do nothing. But it's an intentional nothing. It's a day of thinking. It's a day of reflection. It's a day of asking these questions. What do I want? What are my goals for the next year? How does it show up in the next 90 days? What are my values? Am I living my values? I want to be clear about something right now. I asked Luke at the beginning of this, and I'm talking to the audience now, who's the audience? And Luke said, it's blue collar workers who want more, want change, but maybe don't know how to do that. if you're listening to me and you think, because I get this a lot, that I'm like some private school dude that grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth, and like, you cannot be more wrong. I don't come from any money. We grew up in a 90 square meter house. I've got 3 older brothers. Our carpets were threadbare. My mother had a microbus that literally was rusted through. We used to watch the road go past as we drove. It didn't have seatbelts. We look after my parents now. There was no inheritance coming. I used to make money at school by waking up at 3 a.m. and going look at the classifieds and buy laptops for cheaper so I could sell the laptops, because that's how I started my business. I was a barman while I was starting my business. Like, I'm just painting a picture here. Like, there is no leg up that I got from this stuff. So if you're listening going, yeah, rich people can take clarity days, or this is for rich people, like, I'm not rich people. I wasn't ever rich people. I'm still not rich people. And this is important because a lot of people listen to this kind of talking and they think that's for those kind of people, not me. So it starts by just making the time to think about, what do I want? That's how it starts. Don't overcomplicate this. Pick up a notepad. Find an hour or two in the next week and just write those questions at the top of your notepad. Who do I want to become? What do I want? What am I optimizing for in my life right now? And just see where it goes. Then when you have your first version of those answers, go down and say, does my environment support this? Who am I spending time with? What am I putting in my body? What am I watching on TV? Am I exercising? Does my environment support this? And then the last part of it is, what are the habits that if I put them in place would get me closer to being that person? And just pick 3. Call them your keystone habits. Spoiler alert, they're going to be sleep, exercise, and meditation. You might not get there the first time. I promise you they're going to be those.
Yeah.
Right? But do your own version. Maybe it's just, I don't know, something else. That's the practical answer. You don't need a cent for any of this stuff. If you're saying I don't have time, I'm going to challenge you. How much time have you spent on Netflix over the last week?
I would also say find somebody in your life that you can speak to about this.
The environment
right? Because the self-motivation to sit there and really think about your life,
it's fucking terrifying.
I think the majority of the people don't have it. I don't think they, people, you clear that spare time, then you'll just go, okay, I need to actually breathe, and they'll completely forget about what they're trying to do.
Yeah. That's the environment piece. Pick
exactly,
somebody.
Yeah.
Pick somebody. They're there. You also might get a bit of a fright. If you're the courageous one, remember, vulnerability cannot come from courage. If you want to be the courageous one, next time you're sitting with your mates at a pub drinking beers and you start talking like this, one of 2 things are going to happen. They're going to show themselves as people that are not good for your environment, or you're going to change an entire line of conversation where people are like, oh my God, yes, I would way rather not be drinking beers. I want to go and do this, but I was too scared to say it.
And I would say that's the way the conversation normally goes. I had a huge fear of speaking, vulnerably, and through a lot of EO forum, that's really kind of helped me.
Yeah.
But I'm just at the stage now where I just openly have these conversations, right? And if somebody reacts in a what it does is it clears out your friendship list of who you probably don't want to be friends with, because you start talking like this and you just get a blank stare and they want to change the subject. Yeah. Then you go into the, what value are we adding to each other's lives here?
I don't have a lot of friends, and I'm okay with it, and it's because of this. I just don't know how to do small talk.
Yeah.
So if we hang out, I'm not going to talk to you about sport. I like sport. Don't get me wrong. I played sport my whole life. But I'm not going to talk to you about sport, the weather, politics, or how things are going. I'm going to go deep and hard fast. You don't have to go there with me. But either you're going to love that and we're going to become good friends, or you're going to be like, this guy's a total intense freak and we're not going to be friends. And both of those outcomes are totally fine. But I'm not going to waste my life talking about sport and beer.
Yeah.
Because that's a wasted life, in my opinion. If you get deep fulfillment and deep happiness and deep joy sitting at the pub, drinking beer, talking about sport, fine. But I don't think anyone in the history of humanity did. It's generally because we don't want to actually have the difficult conversations and go there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not here to judge. Like I've done stupid shit, which we can talk about if you want, like stupid, bad shit. So but the feeling of joy is so much better than the feeling of pleasure. And that has taken a bit of maturity to actually sort of, I guess, experience.
Sorry,
Right.
say that again. The feeling
of joy,
is better than the feeling of pleasure.
in my experience,
Mm-hmm.
pleasure generally is fleeting. It generally comes with a cost.
How do you differentiate the two? So pleasure's more hedonistic?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally the definition,
Yep.
right? Whereas joy is, it's hard. Like, these are very subjective meanings. But for me, joy is light, it's long lasting, and it's generally constructive. Pleasure for me might be really fun, but there's generally a cost associated with it. Generally. This is subjective. These are not the definitions. These are my experiences of them. So pleasure for me is big night out drinking, or way back in the day, recreational drugs, or sexual exploits, like
Hedonism,
fun
yeah.
as well, but it's hedonism, and there's usually a cost. Usually. The day after or an hour after, you're like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, that sort of thinking, right? Buying something.
Yes. Yeah, and look, and that's what, it's just to bring it back again to my alcohol consumption. That was the big one, right? So it's seeing, oh no, like when I was in it, it's like I don't want to give up this pleasure, okay?
Yeah.
But reflecting back, what you're calling joy, what I would call happiness or whatever, I was severely impacting that on a larger scale.
Pleasure, in my experience, generally robs joy. And I'll tell you
And
something
that's
else.
what I was doing.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing about joy, and this is, we won't go too far down here, but I really struggle with this, is that there's a great quote, which is, comparison is the thief of joy. I compare myself to a lot of people, right? Every time I do, guess what? Feel like shit.
Yeah.
Or I'm like, I'm better than that person. That also robs joy.
Yeah.
Because I'm not better than anyone, right? But you look at it, oh, do I have a fancier car? Do I have more money? Am I don't know, whatever the hell. But whatever you're comparing, it's the thief of joy.
And I usually find with those kind of things, you're comparing one aspect and not looking at the whole, right? So it's like, let's say if you're into running and you're looking at someone else who can run a faster marathon, they probably don't have, they might not have family and kids. I used to have a friend who I went to high school with, and I reconnected with him later, and he had built this fucking insane business, right? And then I just felt like a complete failure for about a week. Then I realized he's not married, he doesn't have kids.
Yeah.
That's his whole life. And I go, wait, am I willing to sacrifice what he sacrificed to get it? No. So why do I care?
Yeah. And that's the thing is, there are no solutions. There's only trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I probably could build $1 billion business if I dedicated my life to it, probably. I just have no inclination. And by the way, I think anyone could do it, just to be clear about that. I don't think I could do it and someone else couldn't. It's just, I'm not willing to sacrifice what I think I would need to sacrifice to build something that big, for example.
Now, more and more as I get older, I see people doing that, and I go, fuck, what happened to you that you need to prove yourself this bad? Why are you willing to sacrifice everything to do this?
Yeah. And, my dad always says to us, like, it's about your death. I'm like, what do you mean, Dad? And he doesn't use these words, but for me, what that means is, and it's cliche, but just, if you know what I'm about to say as a listener, listen for insight, not for information. But like, picture yourself lying on your deathbed, whether you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or 120, looking back on your life. Are you going to regret the choices? If you are, don't judge yourself. Just acknowledge that you've got power. You've got control over a lot of stuff in your life. The other stuff you don't have control over, well, stop trying to control it. So, in Alcoholics Anonymous, in AA, right, the 12-step program, I know it very well because while I haven't been in rehab, I've put friends through rehab, and I kind of did it with them because I found it fascinating and really useful. And there's the serenity prayer. It's very, very common. It's very, again, I'm not religious. It sounds Christian, but I'm not religious. And it's, God grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You can change a lot of stuff. Change the stuff you can change. The stuff you can't change, don't even try, because it's out of your control. And really think about the things that are in your control and out your control, no matter what your living and life situation is. Right. So, pretty intense conversation. Pretty cool. And what's interesting about this is that, like, I consider myself like a business strategy and performance coach and a business person, and that's a big part of my identity. And like, yet we haven't even spoken about business. This stuff is not separate from it. This is integrated.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, what's plateaued the business every time is my I guess, the self-growth not keeping up with the business growth.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't handle the next level.
100%, man. And I don't, like, we've been talking today as if I'm like a therapist or a psychologist, which I am definitely not. People generally come to me for business coaching. We've worked together. We do talk a lot about strategy, tactics, business growth, sales, all these things, but we talk as much about this stuff because the degree to which you get your own shit together as a human being is the degree to which you're going to be able to run a better business without it consuming yourself and being at the expense of you, right? Which has led to, and I won't plug it, but it's even led to a business that I've co-founded with the caption, and we won't talk about it because I don't want to be salesy, but the whole caption is you don't have to give up on your business ambition to level up the other areas of your lives. In fact, I really do have high conviction that it's in service of. You're going to be a better business operator. You're going to have a better career if your mental health is better, if your physical health is better. Not even from an emotional perspective, just literally from a brain chemistry perspective, you're going to be better. You know, they've done studies on sleep. One of my co-founders is a GP, and he actually told me about this. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think he said 2 nights of terrible sleep puts your brain into the same state from a decision-making perspective as being drunk. So you're literally stupider. Like you are literally making worse.
While We Sleep.
While We Sleep, Matthew Walker, yeah.
Yep.
Amazing book. You're literally stupider. When you're stressed, when you're fearful, the part of your brain that's making decisions is called the amygdala. It's the stupidest part of your brain. It's the fight or flight part of your brain. You're literally making worse decisions. When you've had sleep, when you're post-meditation, the prefrontal cortex kicks in. That's the part of your brain, if I remember correctly, that's responsible for logic and decision-making. So like, if you listen to this thinking this is airy-fairy nonsense, it's really not.
No, it's not.
Right?
One of the other greatest things that I've got from you and your podcast is now when I catch myself spiraling into anxiety or stress, the first thing I do is check what I call, or what we were speaking to as the fundamentals. All right? And that is sleep, meditation, training, and reading.
And alcohol with most people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely alcohol for me, but
Yeah.
not at this stage of my life, thankfully.
Well, I'm calling it out because like you almost laugh about it, which is beautiful because it's like, oh, I don't need to worry about that anymore because I've habitualized myself so much that's not even a thing. Mm-hmm. But it started with the self-awareness and the measurement of it.
Yeah.
You know, so what Luke's talking about here is my habit tracker. And the reason I use Google Sheets or Excel with conditional formatting to say if I've done it, it's green, if I haven't, it's red, is because I can just look at my habit tracker. And if it's all red, I can guarantee you I'm going to be feeling anxious and shit.
Yep.
If it's all green, I can guarantee you I'm going to be feeling good. It's not a mystery anymore.
Exactly. Same
it's the fundamentals, man. Like
Yep.
if I'm not sleeping, if I'm not training, if I'm eating poorly, and if I'm drinking, I'm going to be feeling shit. Like I just know it.
Yep.
But the converse is also true. Mood follows action. And this is a key thing. Again, I just want to repeat, this is not for rich people. This is not for people with means. This is like all of the shit we spoke about today is free. Everything. And if you say you don't have time, again, I want to challenge you. How much time have you spent in front of Netflix or other shit this week? Because that's the time that you can bring back to build a better life, right?
Mark Scott, you're a legend. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for the chat, buddy.